It could be argued very legitimately that this event that took place yesterday at the time of this recording is the biggest moment of spaceflight, at least as far as this week is concerned, the static fire of the Super Heavy. However, it must be remembered that only 3 engines were static fired on this particular occasion. Now, a full test duration, as Elon was talking about, is not a full test duration as the green run is, with several hundred seconds worth of testing, but as you saw, just a very brief test of a couple of seconds, which is typical of SpaceX. So when it comes right down to it, this static fire was little more than a 3-engine test like SN15, except underneath a different vessel. So impressive and definitely a step forward, but a far cry from this. This was the static fire of the Falcon Heavy back in 2018 with 27 Merlin engines. And if Super Heavy is going to perform as expected, it's going to have a static fire of at least this many engines, and Elon is talking over 30. As a matter of fact, he still hasn't established a firm number. So, not to say that this wasn't a big event, there's just a long ways to go. And although it may shock you to discover this, I believe that this is actually the big space story of this week. Wally Funk going to space for the first time. This lady, after so many decades of waiting for her opportunity, after so much that she's contributed to the United States and to the world in terms of being a test pilot, in terms of preparing the training programs for astronauts, for everything that she's done to deserve to be an astronaut, she will finally have the opportunity, and I can't wait for this to happen. It is a gigantic moment in the history of spaceflight. That being the case, however, I believe that this moment should be hers and hers alone, and Jeff should not be on this flight. He has other matters to attend to. Why do I believe this? We're gonna find all of that out in just a moment. Good evening, and welcome to yet another episode of the Angry Astronaut, traveling once again. Now I'm in Cape Canaveral, actually Cocoa Beach, doing my best not to wake my son, probably without a whole lot of success. But in any event, as I mentioned to you before, this is the only time that he really has available to travel, so we're having a little bit of fun. I took him to the Cape as well, hopefully going to a museum or two while I'm here, and of course the other fun stuff that there is to do in this area. But I'm not going to talk about that. That is not the topic. After all, the topic is what is going to be taking place tomorrow as I record this, and that is, of course, the launch of New Shepard with good old Jeff on board, along with Wally Funk and company. And my whole argument that he should not be on this rocket, he should have nothing to do with what's currently going on. I am all in favor of Wally Funk going up on this rocket. That is a wonderful gesture that Jeff made. I am completely in support of it and certainly hope that everything goes fantastically for her. And I would even encourage Elon to send her up on a future mission of the Crew Dragon. Seriously, I mean, given everything that lady sacrificed for spaceflight and the fact, the simple matter of her gender was the only thing that prevented her from going to space, I think that lady actually deserves to go to orbit, in my opinion. And also some valuable scientific information could be gathered, really, because no female of that age has ever gone to orbit. So it could give us some extremely useful information for the future. So really, there's a lot of good reasons to do it. But enough about that. In terms of why I think Jeff should not be doing this is kind of related a little bit to what I have here. I purchased a Blue Origin mug and a Boeing mug. Starliner, whatever you want to call it. And I am going to be launching this 2-stage rocket when my channel hits 90,000 subscribers. Hey, dream big, right? But in any event, that's what I intend to do. And what does this have to do with all of that? Getting to orbit, or more importantly, getting somebody else to orbit. Boeing has failed to get the Starliner, at least to the proper orbit, and Blue Origin has not gotten anything to orbit at all. And now, because of Blue Origin, these guys, and yeah, I'm not wearing all of this by accident, this ULA Vulcan merchandise, these guys can't get to orbit either. The first and maiden launch of the Vulcan Centaur has been delayed until 2022. The official reason is because of the Peregrine, that there have been delays with that, and to that I say bullshit. That felt good. Let me say that again. Bullshit! Okay. Anyway, so now that that's been said, let me explain why I feel that way. It is utterly critical that the Vulcan Centaur, as I've explained in previous episodes, gets to orbit by 2023. If it does not do so at least twice, then they are going to be losing their military contracts. Regardless of whether Peregrine is ready or not, Vulcan Centaur needs to get to orbit if ULA is going to be carrying out these extremely important military contracts that they have coming up. And they can't do it without the BE-4 engines. And as of now, and I made a video about this a while ago, and still there is not a flight-worthy BE-4 engine having been delivered. And there's a lot more talk about ULA becoming increasingly frustrated with what's going on. And I have some ideas as to why Blue Origin may not have delivered these engines on time, and this is pure speculation, but nevertheless, whether this is true or not, the fact that these engines have not been delivered is a very serious problem, one that Jeff should be exclusively focused on, not going to suborbital space for some big stunt, but instead he should be focusing on what his company is supposed to be good at. He isn't, and I'm going to tell you all about it right now. At the very moment that I am recording this, there are 56 minutes and 17 seconds until liftoff of New Shepard. This is a monumental time, obviously, for Blue Origin, regardless of how you look at this. And this animated sequence was put together years ago, so really this has been a very long, very exacting labor of love that Blue Origin has undertaken in order to get New Shepard and its human passengers into flight. And I'm not taking anything away from them as far as this is concerned. Granted, I think that it's ridiculous that it's taken them 20 years in order to accomplish this. Yes, it took a similar amount of time for Virgin Galactic, well, not quite that long, about 16, 17 years, but in the meantime, they sent satellites into orbit with the sister company, whereas Blue Origin still has yet to send anything into orbit, and they won't be sending anything into orbit today either. But that's not what this is about. I've said that many, many times. The point is, who should be going up? I'm all in favor of the people who are going up right now, including Jeff's brother. Mark Bezos is 53 years old. He's only a year older than me, actually, and he's the younger brother of Jeff and a millionaire in his own right. He has shares of Amazon, he's a former ad executive, and also the co-founder of a private equity firm called High Post Capital. On top of that, he's also on the leadership council of a nonprofit organization called Robin Hood, which fights poverty. Not a bad guy, really, to take up on this thing. And then there's the young Dutchman Oliver Damon, 18 years old, who's planning to study innovation in physics at the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, been wanting to fly to space since he was 4 years old, and apparently his father made that possible. His father is the CEO and founder of Somerset Capital Partners, and this kid, I think, is actually the winner of this anonymous $28 million contest, his dad having paid that money so that he could fly. Why he would pay this kind of money when he could pay the same to get this kid into orbit, I will never understand, but he's the youngest kid to ever go to space, so more power to him. And then, of course, there's Wally Funk, who deserves an episode of her own, part of the famous Mercury 13 program, which involved women being tested by NASA as potential astronauts during the early days of the U.S. space program, Gemini, and all that. And Jeff personally invited her. Obviously, he had a great deal of appreciation of the contribution of these young women to the future of American space flight and space flight in general, and as I've said before, this was an amazing gesture on his part, and I couldn't applaud him more. However, in my opinion, she should be sort of a mission commander, and perhaps another employee should be chosen, and Jeff should not be going at all. And as of this moment, less than 37 minutes from takeoff, the crew is ascending the stairs to the gantry-way over to the capsule. This is actually a very different process than what NASA astronauts have to go to waiting in their capsule for hours prior to liftoff. Not entirely the same as VSS Unity, which can kind of take off on a moment's notice, but nevertheless, very, very different. Not a whole lot of time waiting before the ignition is thrown. But unlike the VSS Unity flight, I do not believe that any scientific experiments are being carried out on this particular flight. They have been carried out on Blue Origin flights in the past, but I don't think it's happening this time. I believe that this particular flight is little more than a publicity stunt for Jeff Bezos. Now, granted, what's being done with Wally Funk is a wonderful thing, but But still, the fact that Jeff is doing this for her is very, very good publicity for Blue Origin. However, I think that the publicity that they're going to get off of this is going to pale in the face of all the negative things that have been happening between Blue Origin and ULA. As a matter of fact, according to insiders at ULA, not very many people are going to be celebrating when Jeff steps off of that capsule later on today. Not at all. And this is, of course, because ULA made the fateful decision 7 years ago to go with this engine for their Vulcan Centaur rocket. In February of this year, over 5 months ago, the core stage for the Vulcan Centaur was rolled out at Cape Canaveral to great fanfare, and I personally was extremely excited about this whole thing as well. It certainly appeared that the Centaur was going to fly in 2021. It just appeared that ULA could not possibly miss. However, those BE-4 engines on the back of this thing, those are what's called development engines. Now, I'm not sure what good those do because they're not even going to be fired, not even under test circumstances. That's why I showed you a static fire at the beginning of this video, by the way, to demonstrate how rapidly SpaceX has been able to carry out static fires with their Raptors, whereas after 7 damn years, Blue Origin still is not ready to carry out a static fire with their BE-4s. Now, if you listened to Tory Bruno, or indeed even watched what ULA was doing at the Cape, you would think that nothing was going wrong. ULA is installing a liquid methane tank underneath pad 41 where this thing is going to be launched. Liquid methane, of course, being necessary for the BE-4 engine along with an oxidizer. Everything seems to be going smoothly, and Tory Bruno has been assuring everybody that this is going to be happening this year. Well, at least he was assuring everybody of this. This is no longer the case. However, ULA is blaming the Peregrine lander as not being ready yet, rather than blaming the rocket or the engines. But the fact remains that flight-certified BE-4 engines have not yet been delivered to Cape Canaveral or to ULA. According to Tory Bruno's earlier statements, this thing should have been undertaking static fires with the BE-4 engines by now already. July was the D month, basically, for this thing to start making tests, and this obviously is not happening, nor is there any indication as to whether it's going to happen this year or not, even the static fires, and that is very critical to the future of ULA. Now, the Vulcan Centaur was the rocket of choice for the Sierra Nevada Dream Chaser, which is due to be ready by next year, but this is not at all the most critical aspect of what's going on. The Dream Chaser can be taken into orbit by the Atlas V. However, the Atlas V can no longer carry out military contracts by law beyond 2023. There are no exceptions that can be made here, as have been made recently. This has to happen. American engines have to be developed for ULA rockets in order for them to take up military payloads. And given that they got 60% of the pie for all of the next 5 years worth of launches for the military, this is unbelievably critical for this company. Really a game changer. This rocket needs to fly at least twice before 2023 because the military will not allow any of their satellites to ride on a rocket unless it has had 2 successful flights, and the clock is ticking. But given what's at stake right now, I have a question. Why is Blue Origin dragging their heels so much with this? Is this indeed an engineering problem? Or is it because they're trying to get their own rocket into service in order to be competitive with the Vulcan Centaur? After all, when they made this deal with ULA, they did not think that they were going to get none of the US military contracts. They had no idea that ULA would be securing 60%, SpaceX 40%, and Blue Origin 0%. Are they looking perhaps to get New Glenn into service at roughly the same time as they get the Vulcan Centaur into service? And if so, would the relationship with the military and ULA have deteriorated to such a point that it would give Blue Origin an opportunity to step in if the contract were to fall apart? It seems very unlikely, but I have to ask myself, is this whole situation with BE-4 and the Vulcan Centaur by design to give New Glenn a chance to jump into the competitive fray in a more advantageous time frame? If that is indeed the case, then ULA has been thoroughly betrayed, and an excellent way, in my opinion, for Jeff Bezos to demonstrate that that is not the case is to not go on this flight and to demonstrate that he is focused on what he should be doing right now, his most important contract, and that is not a fun-filled ride to suborbital space, but his deal with ULA. But my recommendation, I'm afraid, is a day late and $1 short. New Shepard is about to set down, at least the booster, and the capsule is in 0G and preparing to set down in a few minutes as well. New Shepard has triumphed in terms of taking human beings into suborbital space, but in my opinion, something that is far more important has been neglected and today ignored. So, just to make everything perfectly clear, I do not thoroughly believe that Jeff is intentionally dragging his feet on the development of his engines in order to sabotage ULA because they got all of those military contracts and he didn't, and he's seeing an opportunity. I regard it as a possibility, but a remote one. Still, it would very much benefit Blue Origin if ULA were to fall off the wagon, so to speak, and then is the military going to give 100% of their business to SpaceX, or might they consider somebody else? Just seems to be conveniently beneficial to Blue Origin, and that is something that concerns me a bit because, as you can see, I like ULA. I like the Vulcan Centaur. I've done videos about it. There are a number of things about this rocket that are innovative. It involves on-orbit refueling like the Starship, has a reusable second stage that can be used for many other purposes besides just the conventional use of a second stage. There are all kinds of things about the Vulcan Centaur and its future plans as far as development are concerned that are exciting as hell as far as I'm concerned. And that's great stuff, and it is all about to be sabotaged if this engine doesn't get ready, and it doesn't get ready right now. Now, do I think that if Jeff doesn't go on his little flight tomorrow, and by the time as I release this, it will have already happened probably, but do I feel that, him not going is going to make any difference? No, but the thing of it is, I believe that him going sends the wrong message. It sends the message that he's just focused on having fun, showering accolades on Wally Funk, which she deserves, but, he's kind of hogging a little bit of attention himself by doing this, and, everything else associated with New Shepard. There's nothing about New Shepard that benefits anything else that Blue Origin is currently working on. And once again, in my opinion, the BE4 engine and its critical contribution to the Vulcan Centaur is the most important thing that Blue Origin is working on right now, and they are blowing it. And so I think that Jeff should man up and own this and say that, you know what? I'm not going to distract my company, distract anybody else from our primary task by getting on this rocket. Instead, I'm going to stay here on Earth and resolve this situation. And then once it is resolved, then I'll go up and have some fun in a space capsule. That's what he should do. He isn't going to do that. But really, I think that that would be the honorable thing to do, given the grim situation that he has put ULA into right now. ULA is admittedly a competitor, but they are also a partner, a critical partner, and have been for a long time now. And what's happening at this moment is starting to border on a betrayal, and this needs to stop. This needs to be turned around. If Jeff Bezos actually does care, if he actually does have the best interests of ULA at heart, then he should forget about this trip to suborbital space and stay focused on these engines until they are ready for the Centaur. But you know what? Somehow, I shouldn't even have said Centaur for the Vulcan. The Centaur portion is actually going to be powered by Aerojet Rocketdyne, and ironically, that's probably who ULA should have gone with in a comprehensive nature with all of their engines rather than relying on Blue Origin. Sadly, because it seemed like an innovative idea at the time, but now it's put them in a world of hurt. If you like what I have to say, if you like my bluntness and the fact that I will be this way regardless of where I happen to be traveling or who I happen to be traveling with, if you enjoy the content that I put out no matter what, then you know how to support me. It's all in the description. Many ways to become an angry advocate, as I'm starting to call my supporters, either through Patreon or that little join button that you see beneath the screen. And I would be deeply appreciative because I think I'm going to have a Starship launch to be attending here pretty soon. And I have to admit that has me pretty excited and on the edge of my seat. So until Blue Origin does the job that they were contracted to do, delivers these critical engines to ULA and gets this matter taken care of as they should have from the beginning, until they do their job so ULA can do theirs, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.